Okay, so let's go through some of the steps and the process of doing the kinds of sketches that you see on page 165, which is where this tutorial's hard linked to. So the sketches on that page were done with, again, the light marker, and this is really the part where you don't worry about perspective, and you don't worry really about technique. You really just try to focus in on what you're drawing, not really how you're drawing it. So this is where you just free think, basically, and say, okay, well, I want to do set up some wheels, so I set up a wheelbase. I'll just draw a side view first. And a side view is usually where I start. And when I say side view, it doesn't have to be literally a side view. It can just be a draft view. So I just get rid of perspective. And I don't know what kind of vehicle I'm going to do yet, but I know so I drew a front wheel. I almost always start with the front wheel. Any wheeled vehicles, actually. Doesn't matter. We could even add another wheel and just make it a truck. Still start with the front wheel. I was going to do some off-road thing, and now we'll just turn it into a truck. So I set up the wheelbase first. So you saw those little tick marks. There's 1, 2, 3 wheels in between, and then the next wheel, and then the next. And then you just start thinking about the bigger shapes. And since we're working in draft view, we don't have to worry about perspective. We could show a little bit of the far side wheels. This is the little cheat that I talked about in the book, of showing perspective on the wheels and then drawing the vehicle itself in draft view. And I can't remember what that's going to be in this chapter. I don't think it's not yet, but it's coming up. And you just start to draw out big shapes and find relationships and rhythms. And a lot of times it's just like this, just loose sketching and trying to find forms that are interesting. And maybe let's go a little ridiculous here and put some big monster exhaust pipes on it. This is my C1 and it's dying, so I'm going to have to switch to something a little bit fresher. I'll go refill this one if I have any refills for a C1. I don't know that I do. So you might just start out with something like that. And I know you probably can't see it that well, but it's all there and I can see it. And then a lot of times I'll do one of two things. I'll either jump in with a slightly darker marker and go in where I know it's going to be dark and just block in a few little areas to remind myself. And so this is kind of starting the refinement process. And let's identify my wheel centers. Tires, of course, I can make those a little bit darker. Always dangerous trying to do them freehand, of course, but just a quick sketch. So I call these, this is a little bit larger than I draw normally for my really quick thumbnail sketches. I'm doing that so it's a little easier for you to see on camera. There's some sort of a fender there. So you could just think about darkening some areas just as really a reminder. But a lot of times, and like the sketches that are on page 164 and 165, there's not a lot of darkening that's happening. The loose light marker is just exploration to help me see the shape. And then once I see it, it's time to go in and pick out and refine the forms with pen. And so I like to use ballpoint pen. You'll notice that all my wheeled vehicles always show the ground plane. Almost always, of course, unless they're in a jump or something. But I think that the ground plane is important. And I think it's really important to establish that relationship of a wheeled vehicle to the ground plane. Because if you don't have the ground plane, then you can't show the rake of the vehicle. And the rake is, right, how tilted, how low the front is and how tall the back is. So if that would be like if my ground plane was here, all right, and that was the pen, it was the car, or the vehicle, that would be like zero rake, and then this would be having a little bit of forward rake, giving it a little bit of attitude. Conversely, cars with the back end sort of hanging down like this tend to look slow and not very agile. So it's just like classic hot rod positioning to get a nice stance for your vehicle. So I might start first with just tightening up the wheels. I usually use a circle guide to come back and tighten it up and try to flat spot them a little bit across the bottom. And let's see, that was a 19. Let's make the rears a little bit larger, give it a little bit more aggressive attitude. So I'm going to come in here and usually do like that and leave the bottom out. Okay, and what was that, 21? It's a little tricky because I can't get my head directly over this because the camera's in the way, so these sketches are always a little bit of a challenge to do right. Now, if you want to add a little deep dish and exaggerate this a little bit, well, first let's do the tire. So it's a series of offsetting circles. So to quickly draw a wheel in perspective, or if we have the tire, and then if the vanishing point was somewhere over here to the right, then what you do is just do slight offsets. So if I want to have, that's the outside of the tire, then the rim, right, would just move over to the left just ever so slightly, depending how aggressive your wide angle or long lens, right? So the faster the convergence, the more the offset. The slower the convergence, more like a draft view, the less the offset. So let's say I want to deep dish this a little bit, then I would offset a little bit to the right. Okay, and then we can bring back the center back out just a little bit. Okay, so that would have, and if I showed the thickness of the tire, we might start to see a little bit of this side right here. Again, depending on the camera lens I've chosen. But that's, and then I always flat spot them a little bit, so because they're flexible, and if your vehicle has weight, then you should have a little flat spot there. So that's a great important connection to the ground plane. So the section through here is basically, we can see my center's offset a little bit, then back out a little bit, and then this is out even further, and then this is back a little. So if I did a little cross section through here, it would look like that in perspective, assuming my vanishing point's over there. So you can see we have a little slight variation. And of course, and if you do that with an ellipse instead of a draft view of a wheel, like I have there instead of a circle, the way you would do that is I just have a 50-degree ellipse here. Okay, let me quickly mark off my minor axis. And then all you would do is just slide in and out along that line. I can't remember what page that is in the book, but I know that it's explained actually on a wheel. So I would do something like this, and then I would leave out actually this little bit of line work here. And if this is my wheel, that would show like the lights shining down, right, like this. And there's a highlight right here, which sort of blows out that little intersection of the rim and the tire. And then I try to also have potentially a little flat spot there, just to connect it to the ground. So if we're redrawing that other wheel we just drew in perspective, this center then would offset. So you can go in or out as much as you like, and that'll be the amount of dish on that wheel. And then maybe the center pops back out just a little bit, like that. So that would be my wheel using that minor axis of 50-degree ellipse. And then here's my center. I don't know if that's actually the true center, because from where I put my ground, this ground looks incorrect for this to be true vertical, because true vertical touches there and there. So that would have to be the ground plane for this perspective grid. So like that would be the ground plane. And that's again earlier in the book about, Thomas covered that, placing ellipses into perspective. Now I can use this true vertical with this adjusted new ground plane. Let's get rid of that one. So vertical, vertical, and vertical here on the outside. And then let's just quickly put a 5-spoke pattern in here. So I divide the top into thirds, take the bottom third, extend it over, and then divide the bottom into half, and then quarter, and then just a tick below that. Those are the other points. And then I could do the same inside here. So that's going to go there, there, and then I'm doing it on this ring, the intermediate one, and then here and here. So I use my height line to locate those 5 points on that circle. So this, say we put just some slots into this, that one's going to look like that. This one is going to be thinner. It's more foreshortened, so it's got to be thin. This one's also pretty thin. Okay, and then this one's a bit fatter. And you might say, well, how do you know exactly how thin this one is versus how fat that one is? Well, if you just add some thickness here to your height line, you can do the same thing. Draw across the top. This will be the top corner of each of those slots. This will be the bottom corner of each of those slots. And you can see how on this angle of the rim, this gets foreshortened. On this one, we look more perpendicular to it. That's why this one's fatter than this one. And this one's really fat this way, but super skinny that way. And so go around. All right, so I could do the same here. I could take the corner over, and I could take the bottom corner over, and make sure the width is the same. That'll tell me how to do that. So that's how I would do the wheels once they're in perspective, but let's go back and finish off this little sketch. So with this little sketch, let's grab my circle guide again, and I tend to go in and do the wheels first. And this is not a, super efficient way of sketching. If I'm doing production work, I try to not do wheels actually ever. When I'm doing production work on a movie or video game, that sort of thing, or for toys, what I try to do is have these wheels already done. So I might already have a Xerox copy of those, or a lot of times I'll just leave them out and leave them blank, just do the tire, and really just focus in on the body, and then scan that and replace those wheels with CG wheels that I would do in Modo, for instance. And I did a lot of that in our book Drive, where I would replace and combine 2D and 3D. So this, I think, is looking just fine. And you can go in and and when I'm working personally and I'm trying to make nice sketches in my sketchbook, a lot like the sketches you see, those came out of my sketchbook, the ones that are on 164 and 165. Those sketches, I would spend more time on them and detail out the wheels, trying to make a nice sketch at the same time. And there's no time constraint for those. Those are just personal sketches. And so when I'm doing personal sketches, then I like to go in and just detail, because how big a difference a nice set of wheels make on a vehicle. So by spending a little bit of extra time, it makes your illustration look a little bit better. It's not going to help your car design necessarily, but it will make the sketch a little bit more appealing to look at. So when people are looking through your sketchbook, and it's also kind of filler. You could always leave the wheels blank, and then at a later date go back when you've got no ideas for design and you just want to make nicer looking sketches. Go back in your sketchbook and then just detail out some wheels. So they're a bit, mindless detailing because they take time, but they do add a little bit to the sketch. That one's totally awful right there. It should be over there. Anyway, let's go on here with the sketch. All right, so I've got a little pipe here that's going to turn, and it's hitting this maybe at like a 45-degree angle. Maybe this is going to be like a double line, like it's a little radius, then I could show the radius up there. And let's add a bit more. We call these greeblies. Greeblies are slang for all the mechanicals you see below a vehicle. And now I'm just pushing that ground plane a bit stronger. Cast shadow underneath a little bit. See the far side tires just a little. Still trying to stick pretty accurately here with a longer lens. Maybe there's some stuff back here in the shadows. More greeblies. And a fender. Maybe it attaches to that structure behind there somehow, and we see the underside of it connecting back over to the center. Big pipe goes up And now it's kind of running parallel to the center line, so these are just basically straight lines. Here it came out, turned, went up, and then we'll turn it again here, and then it's just going to run straight out. Now if you want to show a little perspective, you just have to figure out where's my vanishing point. I would say it's, somewhere probably middle of the wheels, or maybe top even, but sort of between, because we see equal amounts of this rear wheel and the front wheel. So that tells me the vanishing point somewhere between and maybe equal. See a little bit more of the front, so that tells me it's a little closer to the rear wheel. And then if you wanted to put in some guidelines, so this ellipse, we might start to see a little influence of an ellipse here, and then maybe a little bit more there, but still a pretty long lens. And let's just round it off. Let's put in some fasteners. And sometimes, I don't do a lot of shading with the pen, but sometimes just a little bit of a blurry line will be a quick cross-hatching indication that that's a cylinder. And let's work here a little bit on the silhouette. If there's another one of those, my vanishing point's right here, we might see it just a little bit underneath, but it's just really going to be a darker bottom line. But if you darken it here just past center, that'll indicate that there's another one over there. Let's see. I'm just making up shapes as I go. Doing some sort of intake vent there. It's got some sort of weird central engine thing here happening, and then the exhausts come out the side and go up there. And let's take this back. Maybe a little part line, some fasteners. Going to turn this here with a double line, and that's notching in around the wheel. So you could even let us see a little bit of that notch there and cross hatch it all into shadow. The front of this thing's very, very low, kind of a blunt front to it. And then we can put that double line here and maybe even connect it back down to there. And we could radius the bottom with a double line and then add a little more line weight. And a couple more little details. Let's put a little radius on this, and like that. Let's see, there'll be no radius on this edge. Let's pull it tight. And then we see, let's see my vanishing points there, so we see a little bit of the far side. And the fun thing about doing these sketches, I'm not really having to worry much at all about perspective. There's my VP. If I want this to cut straight across and turn a visor, just have to point it at that VP. So just that little hook right there is all that it really takes in a side view perspective, in this one-point perspective. Let's put a window on here, and maybe door, some hinges, maybe door handle. So you get the idea, I hope, that these kind of sketches, got some little vents here, are really focusing in on the shapes more. It's more about, to be honest, it's more about graphic design than it is about sculpting form or worrying about cross sections, worrying about perspective. At this level, that's really all you need to do. And then once you have some ideas that you like, then we can start to turn them in perspective, and that'll be the next video in this chapter, which is about, and we could show the far side windows. So this goes through and then hooks over there, and then where's the pillar, where's the instrument panel, all that sort of stuff. We could just shade that in. So that's the nice thing about glass, of course, and what makes glass special is you can see through it. So if you want to make something look like glass, just draw what's through the glass. And then if I want to make a nicer sketch, just like adding wheels, I can come around here and I can start to improve the line weight. But I don't really love this one, so I'm not going to spend that much time doing it. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the classic quick sketch, perspective quick sketch for wheeled vehicles. The classic quick sketch for a wheeled vehicle is usually done with a very low point of view, and a very long lens, but it's also a cheat. I'm going to explain why it's a bit of a cheat. So let's think a little bit about top view before we get into this classic sort of front 3/4 low POV. When we're looking at a front 3/4, let's just draw a small car here in top view. Okay, let's say that it's got, let's pull the front out just a little bit like this, and then let's say that the front wheel is there. So this is my top view, and I'm just looking through it. So those are my front wheels. There's the front of the car. It's got a little V section to it, and those are the rear wheels. Okay, now when I look at that, so this is top view. Now, when I'm standing there, and this is just like the schematic that's later in the book about lenses and vehicles. So I'm jumping ahead a little bit here, but this is a nice one to we have to sort of explain this a little bit before I jump into the sketch. So we're standing here and we're looking at this vehicle. Now, if I'm, say, standing here, okay, and I'm looking at this vehicle like so. All right, the angle that I view that plane of the wheel, right, is the degree of the ellipse. So that's the degree of the ellipse. The angle I view the rear wheel, okay, is the degree of the rear ellipse. And then same thing goes for the other ones, the far side, here and here. And so you can see that this is a smaller degree. Let's make that a little bit fatter, a little pie shape there. And then this is, extend that plane of the side of the car. That one's much larger degree. And then this one is even larger than this one. So if this was, say, I don't know, like a 50, this might be 35 degree, and then this one over here might be like a 60. So it's like a 10-degree change from this side of the car to that side, plus, right? Plus 10 degrees to the other side. And then this one looks like about a minus 15 degrees from the front to the back. So if I translate that to a quick sketch, just thinking about that grid, right? We'll start with something like a 50, and then be like foreshortening those three wheels, and then something like a 35, and then sort of barely see the ground plane. And then on the other side, it would be like a 40 to turn the corner, so that's 3 wheels wide, and then this one's like 10 degrees larger than this one. And then that one back there would be sort of right in between this one and this one. So that's going to put it probably 45-ish, somewhere there, 40, 45, depending exactly where it's at. So it's probably a little closer to this one. It's probably more like a 45. So if that's a 50, that's a 35, that's a 60, based all on this top view. Now, I don't know, I was just guessing, but that's my quick sketch estimate of those ellipse degrees. Okay, the other thing that's really important before we get into this classic sketch that's kind of going to be on this perspective grid right here, before we get into that, you want to also think about where's the center line. So the center line in this case, because it sticks out quite a bit, would hide the front of that wheel. So there I would actually know that the center of my car is right about here. Okay, and so that would be the center of it, and we don't see the other side. It's hidden behind, but it's only slightly ahead of the rear wheel. And this is the way that we're going to actually measure, make a nice, really ugly car here. So that's my center line, for instance. The way that we're going to measure and place our center line and all the elements that are going to be placed left and right in this perspective with a really flat lens, long lens, which is also called a flat perspective because there's very little convergence to the right vanishing point or to the left vanishing point. So with that slow convergence, this is actually the cheat. So we want to draw it with slow convergence left and right because it makes it much easier to draw the car. But if I look at how close I am to the object, I see that this is quite a big visual change from 50 to 35. So the classic cheat is to do like we're pretty close to the car for the wheels, and then to just treat all the rest of the guidelines going to the left and the right vanishing point. Sorry, this one's going to the right, the length of the car, like through the wheel centers, going that way, or along the ground or the shoulder. Okay, going to the right vanishing point, and across the top, across the front of the windshield, for instance, that would go to our left vanishing point. But to draw those with very, very little convergence. But I can see I'm actually pretty close to the car. So this is the cheat. We tend to draw these with more convergence, okay? And the way you could always get around it and say, oh, well, the front wheel's turned a little bit towards us, and that could increase this by 10 degrees. Because if I look at going further away from the vehicle, like this long lens would suggest, the long lens here and the flat, slow convergence suggest we're much further away from that car. So if that was the case, and we were much further away, again, here's our little top view, and if we were way back over there, and in fact, I'm going to be out of frame, I'm going to be so far away, and if I look at, well, let's just put a little point on it, and if I draw guidelines here, sight lines, back to where I'm standing, way off the page, you can see now the degree change between here and here might only be -5 degrees from the front wheel to the back wheel. And from this one to this one, it might even be the same ellipse if it's a really, really slow convergence, same degree, or maybe just like a +5 to the far side. But here you can see it's almost in line. So this one's going to be it's more like a +2 degrees. So point being, the degree that you sketch your ellipses with here determines how close or how far away we are from the car in top view. And how close or how far away we are should influence the speed of the convergence. So how would we do that more accurately? Well, the box I would draw for that would just start with drawing a box instead of starting with the ellipses. And then I would say, okay, well, there's my ellipse. That's going to set the lens, right? I'm saying that's on the side plane. Let's go to the middle there. And then I would just start to multiply that down the side, and then you would have, in my fourth wheel here, I would have the proper degree by multiplying those squares. And I would have the convergence set properly. And then you've got to go to the other side. I go this way. And what I like to do when I flip to the other side is I like to take, if this is like a 50 degree, then this one on the other side would be like a 40, because they equal 90, right, in this low perspective here. So if I flip the degree on the other side of that cube, right, that those two circles, those two ellipses make, then that would be like a 40. A true 45 view, of course, these would be equal, 45-degree ellipses both sides. In this case, we see a little bit more of this side, a little less of that side. And then you multiply that across 3 wheels. There's the width of my car. I could draw a box, take it across. And all this is in the chapter coming up. So I know my timing here is a little odd. But before you start drawing things in perspective, you want to have some good ideas. And that's what this one's supposed to be about. So that's back to things more like the earlier part of this, which was about just coming up with ideas first that will draw into perspective. So I'm jumping ahead here a little bit, but I don't want the next video to be so incredibly long, because there's a lot I'm going to cover in that one about drawing specifics of the vehicle form. So that's the underlying thought process behind how to set up the quick sketch. So now let's actually do the quick sketch. Okay, so now let's do one of these cheated quick sketches where we just think about what we're drawing and not really so much about the perspective, just really thinking about the wheels. So the classic car sketch goes something like this. You start with a large front wheel. That sets the view, right? That sets, the minor axis is here. I can see it's pretty much level. So I'm going to draw a line level on the ground. I'm going to draw a line across the tops of the wheels. Then I'm going to go to the back wheel. And And then I even still estimate a little bit of foreshortening to the back. And then let's draw, that would be the same height wheel. And then I just throw a couple guidelines, and you can see the guidelines have really almost no convergence to the right, or to the left. So it's a very, very long lens shot. But we're still going to cheat the wheels, and we're still going to do like a 15-degree change from here to here. And then this is how I usually measure out the front. Take that and do a little bit less, okay, for, as if this is a 50 for a 40 degree. And then I just take that, estimate the foreshortening across. That's the front of the far side wheel. And then I just draw an ellipse that's a little bit fatter than this one. Okay, and then I usually draw 2, and then that's going to be the tire that I see on the far side, right there. And then this one we could add a little thickness. There's the tire here, and this one a little bit thicker. And then to find the position at the back, you just guess, or what I like to do is take my fingers sometimes like this and say, well, there's the width at the front. Okay, and so if that's the front tire here, front tire there, leading edge, then I just go back like this and say, oh, it's going to be right about there. And then I can just draw another one of those. Right, it's basically the same degree as this one, because our viewing angle into it is the same, and then I add the same thickness here to there. So there's my rear wheel on the far side. Now, of course, we would see even more of that in this perspective. We see less of the width at the front, more of the width at the back, so you could cheat that a little bit wider if you want, but it's really just going to be back there in the shadows. We're not really going to see it much at all. Okay, now what you have to think about is what's the front overhang. So the front overhang, right, if we go back to a side view down here, we've got like 3 wheels for my wheelbase, and we've got a little rake to the bottom. Okay, and then the question is, how far does this vehicle stick out to the front? And then what's the side view, and then where's the pillar, the A-pillar, and then we're going to do something like, let's just do something like that. Okay, so if I wanted to translate that, what I like to do is look and see where the A-pillar is pointing, and I don't even have the curvature for the windshield across or the roof. I don't have any of that really added yet. We cannot add all that stuff after, so I usually just think of drawing the shoulder, just the side view of the shoulder and the roof line, down the C-pillar, down the trunk, across the back. So what I like to look at is I like to look at that line right there, and where does that cross that wheel? And that's a key line, and then I'd like to think about dividing up the wheel itself and say, okay, what's my front overhang to the corner? Well, it's about half a wheel, a little bit more than half a wheel. What about above the wheel? Well, like a quarter above at the center. And let's see, how far back is the apex up here at the top of the A-pillar? And where's the bottom of the A-pillar? Well, there's one wheel. All right, that was my second wheel. So it's sort of just like a wheel and 3/4. And this one's like a wheel and a half, and then up, and then how high up? Well, how high up is basically 1. And if I doubled that, that would be 1. So it's like 1 and just past 1.5, maybe. There's half. And so that's how you start to transfer. It's just transferring a side view, right, into perspective, which we covered earlier. Again, I can't remember the page, but we did talk about it in detail. So I'm going to look for those angles. Well, this goes a little bit below, that goes through there. It goes, the apex is at 1.5 wheels, somewhere about there. It's about here in height, and so there's the angle. So that's that angle put into perspective. And then I could do the same on the far side wheel. I could actually just draw it straight across and transfer this across. And if you wanted, you could say, well, there's the 60. We could add the other wheel, and we just repeat the exact same thing on the other side. There's like 1.5 right about there. And you could take this across, take that up. There's the angle. That's actually a ramp in perspective, right? Those lines would be converging to a point above the vanishing point, the right vanishing point. And then there's no tumble home added yet to this. I'm throwing in terms now that we haven't covered, but they're in the chapter coming up, so it is explained. And it's also in the glossary. Okay, if I want to add this line to the front, how do I do that? I estimate ahead half a wheel. Here, I estimate ahead half a wheel over there. Okay, and this is quickly turning into not so much the quick sketch and now a full-blown construction of this box and these wheels, but that's okay. All right, and then that goes over this by about a quarter, and it hits that angle right there. So I'm looking, where's the height, sort of top of the wheel out is the top of the hood, and we go to there, maybe a little bit lower, and across and back over the far side wheel, and then straight across. So you can see I'm translating that side view, and right about there probably. And what's the overhang? A little bit more than half a wheel. There's half a wheel, a little bit more. Height is about there, and angle looks to be about something like this. Level for a bit, and then into that roof line. So there is my foreshortened side view, also similar to my center line, in perspective with my wheels. And now we could add tumble home. I already made that line too dark, but it's okay, I'll darken it. And that's going to lean in the sides. That's going to take that pillar and move it here, move that roof line over. And then I should have found center already. I could do that here at the front. Okay, and then I'm going to pull that center line, and then I'm going to pull it forward a bit. So now I'm just adjusting my center line, just like we did earlier with XYZ section drawing. And let's find it again here, so that's where it would hit. And then I'm going to adjust it there. So a little curvature across the roof. And now we're just basically readjusting this form to give it a little bit of a convex surface across the top. And then you can start to put in whatever details you want. All right, then we have a grill. Maybe I want to pull the sides in to here. Pull the sides in from each side. Okay, and that's going to affect this line, right? And that's like a two curve combo right here. And then let's put another little air intake. So that's kind of where it's heading now. That's the more technical, slower explanation of doing the quick sketch. But the quick sketch, once you've done this construction a few times, is an abstraction or just really a guess at doing that. So when you start to then draw that, once you've done the construction and you do it more from memory, then it becomes more of, let's just use a nice dark pen that you can see easily. Then it becomes like this. You set the ellipse for the front wheel. We barely see some of the ground plane, a couple of tick marks to get my proportions for the rear wheel, and then estimate my width, 3 wheels wide over to there, and then maybe I just draw something like that. Add a little thickness, little thickness, little thickness. Maybe see the far side back tire, a little bit of rake, a little body sculpting, and headlight shape, and then foreshortened wrapping headlight shape on the other side. Angry mouth. This line comes around here like this. Ground plane. Like to have those wheeled vehicles connected to the ground. And then up, and then pillar down the back to the rear of the car, and then up and over. This is a 2 curve combo, and there's the base of the windshield, incorporating some tumble home, window graphic, header across the top of the windshield, door cut, and maybe a little design line or a little fender blip. And let's do center line, maybe another detail, some sort of grill. So That becomes the abstracted, and then some side body influence into my wheel well cut. Let's do something like that. Maybe this one's a little more squarish. So that becomes the really abstracted quick sketch where you really just think about, let's add a little deep dish, the graphics of the car, meaning window shape, headlight shapes, all that stuff comes first, right, before you worry about even putting it into proper perspective. So this is that abstraction where we have slow convergence to the left, very slow here to the right, and but our wheels are actually a little bit more extreme, and would indicate a wider angle lens, but our body's actually drawn in a longer lens. So that's the quick sketch abstraction of all that construction that we just talked about here. And in fact, now I could go back with this one, add a little bit of quick line weight to it. In fact, let's tighten it up with some ellipse guides. Let's see how close I was today with a 50 and a, let's see, 50, a 35, that's what I was guessing at, and a 60. Those were my estimates. Let's see how I ended up. So what you do to clean it up, just what I showed before. My 50 is looking pretty good, like a 50 actually. And what I do is tire outside, and then I let it fade to the front because it has a soft radius on it, and then wheel. So and I offset it a little bit to show that there's a little section to my tire, and then let's throw a little deep dish center on it, like so. Now for wheel well that cuts over the wheel, and I'm just going to darken the ground and the connection to this front wheel here. I'd like to now add a little bit more convergence, so pick that line up a bit and let it converge. All right, so that guy's going to go up just a bit, get a little, so I'm building in a little bit more realistic perspective convergence here. So this one's also going to come up a little bit more. So we see a little bit more of the ground plane. So over there we see a little bit, and then we can see a little bit across the back of the shadow here of the car in top view. And what I do for the wheel well, if it's supposed to be a round wheel well cutout, what I do is take the same ellipse guide like this, and then I tilt it a little bit because I know the side body is probably, we're looking at the front view, and here's my tire, right? And here's the ground. Here's the outside of the car. Probably, right, we've got a little ground clearance. We've got a little wheel well that covers the top of the tire. Okay, so it sticks out a little bit, and then probably a little bit of side body, shoulder, fender lip, and then rolls back under, generally speaking. So, you know, I want to set this, but you can see the ellipse here is still basically on a flat plane. So I just want to set the same degree ellipse, but angled. So that means the minor axis for my wheel well is like this, and the minor axis for my wheel is here, which is the axle. So what I like to do is just take the same degree and just tilt it a little bit. That's the quick way to do it. So a little bit of a gap, and then I like to pull it out a bit so it covers the tire, and tilt it a little bit. I usually only draw the top, something like this. Okay, and then it's going to have to be influenced by the side body and straighten out and then curl under. And then this might actually go behind the tire. So I do the same at the back. You see, you know, a different degree. Let's see how close my 35 was. Not bad. I'll make it a little bit larger wheel on the back, so get a little smaller front wheel, larger rear wheel. And that's my tire. I should have marked my minor axis. If I was trying to be more accurate, I would do that. And let's really deep dish that one. And let's throw the, let's see, tire is there, so maybe wheel well here. Rear wheels don't need as much clearance because they don't turn while they're moving up and down. Like the front wheel moves up and down while it's turning, and that means you need a larger wheel well at the front. And let's do something like that. So, all right, so you could see, just start now sculpting and adjusting the forms. And if you don't get it first time, no big deal, right? This is just a quick sketch, quick rough sketch, and you just do an overlay, and then you adjust it. But if you drew it accurately enough from the beginning, you could have something that you can do an overlay on. So now, sorry, now I'm slowing down because I'm starting to think about design, and of course that's going to slow me down because there's not much nice design happening yet on this one. So, but those are the basics and how you would go about building those basic forms. The 60 on the far side over here, what I would do is usually size it on my wheel here. On the near side, I'm going to find the same size ellipse that I drew, which I think was this one, and then I would go usually one smaller for the far side, just to think about a little bit of perspective. Find my location here, and just flat spot it a bit. And so I very lightly draw the back one, just with a tick mark, and then offset for the thickness of the tire. And so that's what we see on the far side. And then on this one, we could use the same idea. There's the tire. There would be the front radius, then we add a little thickness. And so we see something like that connecting. So those are the basics, of course. The proportions aren't very nice, but that's all about design and not about the drawing steps necessarily. And that's how I would build that. Hope that helps.